I want to thank all of you for joining us for the launch of Demographics via Candid. As many of you know, Candid is a nonprofit that was born through the merger of GuideStar and Foundation Center, creating the most comprehensive source of data about the social sector. Over the past few years, we've seen a surge of interest in equity across the sector. Yet, despite all the rhetoric, the reality is we haven't had the data to know where we stand, identify the gaps, and assess our progress. Even worse, our disparate attempts to gather demographic data have only placed a greater burden on exactly those nonprofits that we say we want to elevate. We can do better. Today, we're going to talk about how. And I can't think of anyone better to kick off our event than our keynote speaker, Cheryl Dorsey, president of Echoing Green. Echoing Green is a global nonprofit that supports emerging social entrepreneurs and invests in their ideas and leadership. Under Cheryl's stewardship, Echoing Green has been at the forefront of promoting equity in the sector for over 2 decades. And as more of the social sector has turned its attention to these important issues over the past few years, Echoing Green's experience and research have been an invaluable resource for so many of us. Cheryl, it means so much to me to have you here with us today.
Thanks for that very kind introduction, Ann Mei. Echoing Green so appreciates your leadership and Candid's partnership. My colleagues and I are thrilled to be with you and the webinar's participants today. We're also glad to be with you during Black History Month. The timing of this event allowed me to spend some time thinking about the rich history of Black data activism. In 1899, Thomas Calloway, an African-American clerk in the War Department, wrote to Booker T. Washington about his pitch for an American Negro exhibit at the 1900 Exposition Universelle in Paris. International fairs like this were powerful platforms to both influence a mass audience and bolster the prestige of nations. Calloway secured funding from Congress and enlisted the brightest minds of his generation, including Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. His hope was to use this unique venue to sway the global elite to acknowledge, quote, the possibilities of the Negro, unquote, and to influence cultural change in the U.S. from an international platform. Dr. Du Bois and his Atlanta University students used an arresting set of 60 data visualizations to challenge the virulently racist narratives of the time. Black innovators continue in this great tradition, including a number of leaders funded by Echoing Green's Fellowship for, as you said, early stage social innovators. I was reminded of the work of the founders of Data for Black Lives, which is building a movement of scientists and activists working to make data a tool for social change. Or the founder of We the Protesters, and now police scorecard and mapping police violence that equips communities with comprehensive data on police violence, evidence-based policy solutions, and cutting-edge tools and strategies to hold their elected representatives accountable for implementing these solutions. In some ways, Echoing Green feels like we're a part of this important tradition and sector call and response as well. Many of you may be familiar with the seminal research we published in 2020 with our partners from the Bridgeband Group on the stunning depth of racial inequities in philanthropic funding. Demographically disaggregated data about nonprofit financial performance or philanthropic grantmaker was not widely available even just a few years ago. So we used our own organization's data set, which was only possible through nearly 10 years of patient and diligent data collection, and expanded it at great effort in partnership with not only the Bridgeband team, but also with Candid, then GuideStar. The seismic impact this research and data had on our sector and the sector-wide conversation it helped spark in a moment of global racial reckoning underscores the value of data and how it can help all of us create a more equitable environment for all. That's why Demographics via Candid is so exciting to Echoing Green, and why we're so pleased to announce today that we'll be joining this initiative as an inaugural partner. We look forward to working with many of you in the years ahead as Candid leads the charge. You know, the idea that our sector can have a tool that is a simple and transparent way to measure our progress toward more equitable funding practices is really game-changing. So let me just leave you with 4 quick thoughts. First, data and data analytics have long been used to improve the quality of products and services, improve efficiency in production and distribution, and fundamentally shape business models. Likewise, a different approach to collecting and analyzing our sector's data, an approach that Candid is catalyzing through demographics via Candid, can really help identify measurable and meaningful steps toward a more equitable sector. Second, I'm reminded of the words of one of our Echoing Green fellows, Antoinette Carroll, an equity designer, social innovator, and founder of Creative Reaction Lab. She says, quote, "Everything around us has been designed, even systems of inequality, but it is possible to redesign for justice," unquote. You know, Echoing Green has lived by these words. The diversity of our grant-making portfolio is by design. We know that redesigning for justice takes intentionality, commitment, and yes, data. Without knowing the depth, the breadth, or types of inequality that are in play, efforts to redesign will be under and ill-informed about what changes are necessary to level the playing field. You know, third, I can't figure out if this point is a caution or a plea, but in discussing the power of data, we have a tendency to weight quantitative over qualitative data, but incorporating lived experiences provides compelling insight regarding both context and action. In many ways, our article co-authored by Bridgeband, quote, "Uncovering Racial Bias in Philanthropic Funding," unquote, was powerful and actionable because the experiences, insights, and yes, pain of BIPOC and proximate leaders allowed us to identify 4 key barriers to capital that both stymie the impact of these innovators, but also undermine funders' best intentions to achieve equity. And last, it's important for all of us to remember that data can drive better outcomes, but it has to result in action at a systemic level. Echoing Green's fierce attention to data collection helped us at the programmatic and enterprise level, but ultimately in partnership with Bridgeband and Candid, allowed us to elevate and deepen our work that led to attention on structural inequities confronting the sector. That's the promise of demographics via Candid. So I'll leave you, you know, I tend to stream content in a really scattershot way. So after Abbott Elementary, the 1619 project, I'm now binging The Crown. And I'm learning a lot about Winston Churchill, who once said, quote, "Give us the tools and we will finish the job," unquote. So I'm reminded of that quote now. Candid is promising and providing us all with both the tool and an invitation to a community. The question really then becomes, what actions are we prepared to take as leaders to drive this work forward in meaningful ways? I look forward to seeing how we collectively address and answer it. So thank you so much for having me here today.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Cheryl, and thank you in particular for your long-standing leadership on equity across the sector. Understanding the current landscape is foundational for our collective work on equity. But the way we gather this data today through duplicative requests for demographic data using different forms, different categories, and different formats places a burden on already stretched nonprofits. Even worse, this unnecessary burden disproportionately impacts those that are already marginalized. And that data, it typically remains locked behind the walls of each funder, neither helping to inform the sector nor available for others to use. Here at Candid, our estimate is that we're asked to share our demographic data about 100 times a year. 100 times a year. And we can't simply cut and paste, as each survey we get is unique. Now, while it's burdensome and unproductive for us at Candid to fill out all these surveys, we're extremely fortunate to have the resources to manage this. But imagine if you're one of the over 95% of nonprofits who have fewer than 4 staff and are scrambling daily to make a dent on the problems faced by your community. You don't have the time to fill out all these ridiculous forms, and that may mean you miss out on a lot of opportunities for funding. How on earth does any of this make sense? The good news is we have a solution. Today, we're launching Demographics via Candid to streamline and rationalize demographic data collection for the entire social sector. This is a national campaign to capture demographic data in a reusable form on Candid's GuideStar profile, where nonprofits are able to tell a story of their work. With Demographics via Candid, we're building a movement to encourage everyone who's seeking demographic data from nonprofits to ask for it through the Candid profile. There, nonprofits can share their demographic data one time using standardized questions and categories. It's high time for us to shift the power imbalance and ask those who are seeking data to take responsibility to harmonize their requests. And here at Candid, we commit to making all of the demographic data we collect available for free through multiple channels. Today, we already have demographic data for over 50,000 nonprofits. And as more funders encourage nonprofits to share the demographic data through the Candid profile, and more nonprofits do so, it'll mean more and more demographic data is readily available for anyone who's seeking it. With standardized data, we'll be able to aggregate these responses to inform our collective work on equity. And funders and others will be able to benchmark their work and track their progress. Equally important, this data will enable those who are seeking proximate leaders to identify nonprofits who truly reflect the communities that they aim to serve. As for nonprofits, they'll be able to stop filling out all those endless demographic surveys and instead share their data one time, allowing them to focus instead on their mission-critical work. Our goal is to contribute towards a more efficient, effective, and equitable social sector for all. Demographics via Candid will only be successful if we all agree to align our work for the collective good. And so I want to give a huge shout out to the 65 inaugural partners who have helped us grow this germ of an idea, creating incredible momentum leading up to today's launch. They represent leading foundations, sector thought leaders, huge nonprofit coalitions, regional networks, and more than half of the most commonly used grant management systems. Now, I know it's probably hard to read all these on the screen here, but you can find them all listed on our website. And we're also excited to see some powerful coalitions starting to form to drive demographic data campaigns across different regions and issue areas. For example, the California CoLab, led by the California Endowment, James Irvine Foundation, and the Weingart Foundation, is collaborating to harmonize demographic data collection across the state of California. Another example is the Equity Data Work Group, which includes the Kellogg Foundation, Cal Endowment, Duke Endowment, Blue Shield of California, Packard Foundation, and the Episcopal Health Foundation, among others. They are bringing together evaluation leaders from leading foundations to define a sector benchmark for identifying nonprofits led by people of color based on our demographic data. We hope that all of you on this call who are not yet partners will consider joining this movement and helping us rationalize demographic data collection for the sector. Please visit our website or email us if you'd like to learn more. Now, to share a bit more about the demographic data we're collecting, along with some early trends, I'd like to introduce Anna Koop, our senior lead researcher. Anna?
Thanks, Ann Mei. I'm happy to be here to talk briefly and concretely about Candid's demographic data today. Who's providing it, what they're sharing, and some findings. So let's dive in. So all U.S. nonprofits, next slide. All U.S. nonprofits are eligible to submit demographic data about their staff and board via their Candid profile. As of this week, we have just over 52,000 U.S. nonprofits that have shared some form of demographic data with Candid. And it's a number that has increased substantially over the past couple of years and continues to grow at a pretty steady clip. We're adding over 1,000 new organizations per month. I'll also add that this is a self-selected sample, which is to say that organizations are choosing to share data with us. But we are capturing nonprofits of all sizes working across all subject areas and located in the range of geographies across the U.S. So what data are nonprofits sharing with Candid? What are we talking about when we talk about demographics via Candid? So this is how the demographic data we're collecting gets displayed on an organization's Candid profile via GuideStar. Here we're looking at the Candid profile. So this is our organizational data. And we're asking organizations about their leader, board, senior staff, and staff, and how people at each of those staffing levels identify by race and ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, and disability status. Nonprofits are asked to report individual level data for their leaders and a co-leader if applicable. And this is the information that appears on the bottom right here. And then we ask for aggregate demographic information, counts, for other staffing levels. So we're intentionally providing a decline to state option here. I want to call that out for people who aren't comfortable answering these questions. And we also don't force nonprofits to respond to all questions in the survey. So moving on to some initial findings from Candid's demographic data, what can it tell us about who runs nonprofits? Here's a simple breakdown based on the organizations that responded to the Candid demographic survey. Here we're looking at the leader level and at racial, ethnic, and gender identity, which are the areas of the survey that tend to have the highest completion rates. And in looking at these charts, we see that the majority of leaders in our data identify as white and that women hold the majority of leadership positions at nonprofits. We also see there's some missing data, which I've elected to include here because I think it's interesting. So the gray sections represent respondents that aren't disclosing this information or skip the question. And these are fairly basic views. You may not bowl anyone over with a pie chart, but I think the power lies in the standardization of these categories and the definition. That's the power of demographics via Candid. All nonprofits are responding to the same survey, which allows for different comparisons. Like how does the overall picture compare to our cohort of grantees or members? Or how does our nonprofit staffing diversity compare to a group of our peers? These are the types of basic questions that don't always have such a straightforward answer or aren't straightforward to answer that demographics via Candid can help with. So going a couple of steps further, the demographic data we're collecting also allows us to look at intersecting identities at the leader or CEO level. And here we've overlaid that with some financial metrics. So we're looking at the intersection of gender and race and ethnicity, and we're comparing the median expenses at organizations led by BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, men and women, with those organizations led by white men and women. And what we see is that when it comes to organizational expenses, white male CEOs have much larger resources. In some cases, the median is almost doubled compared to other identities. It's a finding that's both shocking and unsurprising. And I want to call out that it really emphasizes the importance of taking an intersectional approach to identity data wherever we can. Here, if we just looked at gender, we'd miss the critical finding that organizational finances for BIPOC male CEOs are not the same as those for white male CEOs. And if we just looked at race, we'd miss that organizations led by white women have similar financial circumstances here to those led by BIPOC CEOs. So the demographics via Candid data allows us to look at sector demographics, but more than that, it allows us to see where representation isn't enough. If there are also inequities in how organizations are being resourced. The data allows us to identify these trends within a set of grantees, for example, and then hopefully that is the first step to correcting them. So what's next? Candid has experience with collecting this data, but we're still learning about the best ways to share and use demographic data for maximum impact. So here are some things we're thinking about as we move forward in this journey. First, building a historical data set. How demographics are changing is a critical question for all of this. How are we moving the needle? And this really depends on increasing the growing number of organizations that share demographic data with Candid every single year. We're also interested in filling other data gaps. How do we get more complete survey responses, particularly for those areas that elicit fewer responses about the overall staff for example. And then we're also looking at smart modifications we can make to the demographic survey that allow people to select identities that resonate with their experience in the world while maintaining some consistency in the data set so we don't disrupt our ability to analyze it. To this end, we are introducing some changes to the race ethnicity portion of the survey that we'll be announcing at the end of the week, so look out for that. And then finally, we're looking at collecting global demographic data. Right now, our data is specific to US registered nonprofits, and we know that people would like to see a broadened scope of the organizations that are captured, including non-US organizations. So that's an incredible challenge and opportunity, kind of given that identity is highly context specific. And with that laundry list, I thank you for your time, and we'll turn things back to Ann Mei.
Thank you so much, Anna. What fascinating data. Now, I'd like to welcome some of our earliest Demographics via Candid partners to join me and share their experiences. So please join me in welcoming our 4 panelists: Sotonia Fair, President and CEO of Peak Grantmaking; Grant Elliott, VP of Product at Candid Technologies; Don Stone, Chief Impact and Diversity Officer, Center for Nonprofit Management; and Michael Wright, Chief Technology Officer, Charles Stewart Mott Foundation. So wonderful to have you all with me today, here today. I'm going to start with Sotonia. Sotonia, Peak helps grants professionals operationalize equity and philanthropy. How do you see Demographics via Candid fitting into that mission?
Thank you so much, Ann Mei. I am so excited to be here, first of all, and just congratulations for getting to this moment. My organization, Peak Grantmaking, is always bringing funders together, thought leaders in the sector. And this is of interest to us because demographic collection and analysis is part of the accountability that is required for us to have. We must be, as foundations, as a sector, backing up with data what we say that we intend to do. And so I will say that myself, I was at the early efforts, along with many other of our foundation members, in supporting the Diversity in 5-Year initiative. And so I know I come very early to this initiative, but I was sitting beside members in Peak Grantmaking while we were thinking about how to operationalize and institute practices around sharing our own internal information, as well as thinking about collecting this across thousands of nonprofit partners. And these included institutions that were huge, higher educational institutional agencies. It was going to be a massive project. And so for our organization and for those who were sitting around that table, we were trying to bring the best ideas of doing this as a collective. And so I believe that this resonates so much for Peak because we operate through 5 principles. And demographics touches 3 of our 5. And they're tie your practices to your values, try to narrow power gaps, and definitely think about driving equity through effective and efficient practices. And so this means so much to us, again, because transparency, communication, and accountability must be baked into how you do grants administration. And so Peak is always looking to both follow our members as well as lead them toward innovative ideas, shifts, and changes. The practices, the processes, and the procedures that each of us have impact folks. And if they're done right, they can advance equity. And so we are just such a proud early supporter of this work. We have considered Candid a close partner for many, many years. And just as you supported our demographics launch last year, we are going to be right here with you all along the way. But this sits at the core of something that is very important for this organization, and we're very pleased to be supporting it at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sotonia. We so value our deep partnership with Peak Grantmaking. Thanks for being here with us today. I'd like to turn over to Mike from the Mott Foundation. And Mike, you guys have also been great longtime partners of Candid's, and really grateful for all our collaborations. And the Mott Foundation has been working with Candid for some time now to integrate demographic data into your systems. Can you share some of the lessons you've learned that might be helpful to other funders who are considering becoming a Demographics via Candid partner?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ann Mei. And let me start by saying how grateful I am to be a part of this presentation and to be part of this really fantastic panel that we're seeing right now. The Mott Foundation's mission to promote a just, equitable, and sustainable society compels us to strive to do the best we can to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in our grant making. If we are to achieve diversity and equity in our grant making, one aspect of this is to gain an accurate understanding of who we support and to then be strategic to ensure that the grant making reflects the diversity we seek in our grantee community. While we've historically asked our grantees to share a lot of organizational information directly with us, we struggled to come up with an optimal approach that would not create an additional reporting burden for them. Our solution was to encourage our grantees to report this demographic data on their GuideStar organizational profile, which allowed us to create a custom integration that synchronized this data between GuideStar and our grant management system. This approach demonstrates the value of utilizing a single source of grantee curated data that can be easily accessed and analyzed by funders as well as the communities that these organizations serve. Candid provided incredible support to my team while we developed our integration, but more importantly, they provided direct assistance to our grantees in helping them navigate the process of claiming their GuideStar profile and offered best practices on collecting internal demographic data. Bringing the demographic data into our grant management system was only the first step. From there, we needed to provide our staff with tools to analyze this information against other grant-related data. To that end, we built a set of demographic reporting dashboards using Microsoft Power BI, which we've given to our staff and provided as a new tool for assessing impact to better understand their grantees. Finally, I'd like to share that the feedback we've received from our program staff and our grantees around this project has been overwhelmingly positive. Since our launch, there's been a steady trend upwards of grantees that are not only satisfying our requests for reporting accurate and current demographic data on their GuideStar profile, but also in earning GuideStar seals of transparency through in-depth and detailed self-reporting.
Thank you so much, Mike. That's fantastic to hear, like real life example of how this is working. Don, I'd love to turn to you and I'd love to hear your perspective on how we will know if this initiative is truly successful in relieving the burden on nonprofits, which is one of our major stated goals. Are there ways we can all meaningfully support nonprofit communities so this doesn't become yet another ask?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us here today. But yes, I want to talk about impact, and the way we've been able to see impact at the Center for Nonprofit Management over the last few years is really by looking at the growth of the member, the usage of GuideStar, and the transition from GuideStar to Candid. That was a big thing. We had a lot of education that had to be done with our members. And so we kind of created a campaign, partnered with all the people at Candid that were helping us, and really began to kind of chart the waters together. So one of the things that we look at, I'll give you some real metrics, our membership diversification, and we use that data and we can pull it quickly. So what we found is that the merger actually helped us do a better job. We're almost at a 200% increase in Candid usage over the past 2 years. And so what it's been able to do is to help us look at board diversity in a nice, refreshing way, leader diversity, how we're actually incorporating Candid data into our hiring and retention practices. That's something that's really new, and being a part of the Candid family has afforded us the opportunity to gather that pretty quickly. We also are able to give data to our funders. And so having a Candid profile, just like Mike said, has afforded our nonprofits who are from zero to multi-million-dollar organizations across the state of Tennessee. We have really been able to send funders to Candid to grab the information that they need because it's readily available, and it's made more people get funded a lot faster. And we have actually, in our DEI space, we have seen our penetration in minority-led and minority-owned organizations. We have a village that we've created over 750 people since we started monitoring our numbers using your data, and that's since April of 2021. So we're excited.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. Grant, I hear you've had some internet issues, but I'm glad you were able to join us.
Yeah.
Well, love to hear from you as a someone who works at a grant management system company. What role do you see grant management systems such as Candid playing in advancing this work?
Yeah, I think it's very important for grants management solutions out there in terms of being able to track the right data, report the data out, like Mike was just speaking about, and also to gain the efficiencies that Don was speaking to. If the grants management systems aren't integrated with this data, how do the nonprofits get a more efficient flow of information over to your funders? Otherwise, they're going to have to be putting it in manually from GuideStar, which is not the goal. We want a reduced friction as much as possible. We want nonprofits spending the time out there doing the work that they're meant to do. And so, but still allowing the funders to capture the data they need to measure their impact, to measure their support and the effectiveness of their nonprofits. So I think it's a big part of software vendors or grants management systems to be partners in this sector and trying to listen. Every conference I've gone to for the last 16 years of working at Founded, every foundation talks about how do we work better with nonprofits. And a lot of that is the systems and how do we tie that data together. And then if we can tie it together, we have consistent data and consistent metrics we can be pulling from and leveraging versus data all over the place. And there's a big difference between data and information. So use the right data, capture it, track it, and use it as information. Make it informative so you can make decisions on it.
That's fantastic. Couldn't agree with you more. And so delighted that Founded was the first grants management system that joined us, and that today, as of our launch, we have grant management system companies representing over half the market who are already on board with demographics via Candid. So it'll make both the nonprofit side of the equation and the funder side of the equation much easier to have that seamless integration.
Yeah.
So I want to turn to some more interactive questions and encourage everybody to chime in on these. I'm going to start with a question, start with Don with the first question. What's the best way for, and these are questions that we source from the audience in advance. So please keep your questions coming in the chat if you have other ones. But one of the questions we got in advance during registration was someone wanted to ask, what is the best way for a small all-volunteer organization to gather this type of data? Are there free or low-cost platforms? And this person said they currently use spreadsheets, which is really labor-intensive.
Well, that's a very good question. And unfortunately, most nonprofits do start in the world of spreadsheets. So I'm not going to be a commercial for anyone else, but I do want to put this nugget out there, and I'm sure the other panelists will have something to say. The best way, and the things that I share with our new grassroots nonprofits, I tell them the first thing to do is to align with the agency in your state or in your area that specializes in the work. So, for example, the Center for Nonprofit Management is a space that is in Middle Tennessee. We have 2 other entities. So we have found the best way to collect the data is to have everybody come to the main source, and then we disseminate it that way. So some of you can speak specifically to platforms that work for you, but I just try to stay away from it. I'm going to be equitable here and just say get with the people who have the knowledge, and then from there use that data and continue to build together and report your data. That's another thing that we can do.
Great, thank you so much, Don. Anybody else have thoughts on what advice for nonprofits who are trying to collect this data? How can we make it easier for them?
Well, Ann Mei, I have a couple of things to share. One is that I think it's important as we engage with our grantees around this effort to be clear of the importance of collecting the data and making sure that what we're reporting is what we're getting it from the people that we're reporting on. There's a tendency, especially for small organizations, to say, well, I know this information about my board, I know this information about our staff, and just it's kind of nature, right, to try to be more efficient and fill that in themselves. It's critical that you collect this from the people that you're reporting on. The other thing that I'll mention is making a plug for Satania's organization, Peak Grantmaking. They've got really great resources for some best practices around collecting demographic data, but then also, just within the GuideStar profile, when you go in there, there is an incredibly helpful guide on ways and strategies for how to ask the questions, how to collect it. The tools that we can do this in, spreadsheets, Google Forms, Microsoft Forms. Yeah, you want it to be efficient, but I think what's important is that the organizations recognize the value of building this process in to how they operate and how they show up and stay transparent in their own communities.
Thank you. Do you want to elaborate that on, Tanya, since you were name checked there?
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And I'm going to name check that there's an organization out there helping all the small and zero foundations, which is Exponent Philanthropy, super close to Paul Dougherty and that entire team who have been leading that work. But I think there's a caution here, which is for all organizations, let's be sure that we are supporting this to make decisions, because that's the key, is that we don't want folks getting on, and I'm thinking about Kelly Brown in particular. This is not a checklist. We care deeply about the why behind this, and we want folks to go through whatever machinations you must go through, spreadsheets or using Foundit or great GMS software. Use it for decision making, and it can be done. And the first thing is that we want as many amazing nonprofits to be seen. And I believe that going into GuideStar, into Candid, creating that profile, that's the way foundations, especially formal philanthropy, will see you. And so sometimes we have to change our approach and maybe use different language or framing to get people in the in. But for your organization, we must support nonprofits being seen. And we must say that if we plan to support this number of, Asian-led organizations in Iowa, how can you say you're doing that if not for the collection, the responsible collection of that information? You should only collect as much as you need to make those decisions. You don't have to do what other organizations are doing. So I think to Mike's point is that you can right size your efforts and you can start small and grow, and then look at some of the models that both the technology companies are creating for us to follow, as well as what other funders are doing in your peer group, because that's what Peak does. We try to keep people with peers. You can pretty much keep up with your peer. You can't keep up with everyone. That's not the goal. So thank you, Mike, for that. And I just want to lift up, lots of folks are trying to help people get started. So there's a ton of support and thought leaders in this space.
Thank you, Satanya. As Don mentioned, we do have resources on GuideStar, on Candid websites that can help nonprofits. And I'm pleased that we're going to be spending the next 6 months doing some in-depth research to really understand that nonprofit experience, understand those barriers, and are planning to develop more trainings and resources, as well as hopefully a reusable survey that will make it much easier for nonprofits to collect this information. Sorry, go ahead, Grant. Yes.
Yeah, can I just add one point here, because this is a question we get often from really, really small organizations, and Mike touched on a few ones out there that are effective. So like a Google Forms is a very simple one, and at the top of that, you can put instructions to go to Candid, fill out your profile, put a link to that profile in that form, and here are the 5 demographic questions we want you to fill out. At least that gives you a point of reference to start collecting some data for your organization, and then start working with others to the point around peers in your focus group of geographic, whatever it is, to then say, what systems do you use? How do you analyze that data? And then talk to some providers. There's low cost systems out there, but at least by doing that, you're sending them over to Candid to start filling out those profiles and getting that data back is going to be important for your organization.
Thank you for having that, Grant. Mike, I'm going to turn to you for the next question. To kick us off with the next question. We agree that asking applicants, this is again from one of our participants here, we agree that asking applicants to fill out a Candid profile and then taking the info from there is the best way to approach this kind of data gathering. But how can we help applicants do so? Encouragement, incentives, do it for them if they give us the information. So what's most helpful to encourage nonprofits to share their data in this way?
Signing bonuses. I don't know if that's maybe the most or the right approach, but I do think the potential for less reporting of redundant information is a positive incentive. But, for that to work, it's dependent on getting more funders willing to adopt this approach for common reporting. It'll also require grant management system vendors to be willing to offer out-of-the-box compatibility for leveraging resources like demographics via Candid. Organizations like ourselves that are building tools and systems for utilizing these resources, we need to be active in sharing this work with other people, demonstrating, publishing, tools and resources that other people can use, so we're not reinventing the wheel and really demonstrating the value. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, working directly with the grantees on these sorts of initiatives is crucial, because this can be empowering for them. We took this opportunity, as I mentioned, to really try to show the value for these grantee organizations in owning their profile and leveraging it as a tool to communicate to their own communities.
Thank you, Mike. Dawn, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I love the way Mike was teeing that up. And so what we've done at the Center for Nonprofit Management in Nashville, Tennessee, is made it a part of the process. So when we've developed 2 new programs based on what we found out from Candid, and that is a boot camp. And so part of their onboarding in these 8-hour sessions is that we spend time in Candid. And we also invited the Candid team in to do the training for us. So then they kind of get a break and they have the experts in the room. And then after that, just like Mike said, we're able to build critical mass the more you put in there and the more often you update it. So like the village, that's how the village was created. It literally was each one teach one and bring 2 more. And from that, we were really able to do things and actually get over $2 million allocated from our local metro government for funding for nonprofits, and primarily nonprofits that are grassroots, 50,000 and under.
That's amazing. Love that. So Tonya, Grant, either of you have anything to add?
I would just say, like, support. I mean, there are small foundations, but the one thing that most funders have as an advantage is people. And at Peak, we're really always thinking about how can we be of service. And I will just shout out to all of the grant teams, finance folks who have just started doing office hours, little things where they invite a group of grantees in, whether they are recurring grantees or first timers, to just make a little space for that, to sit with them, link them over, or if you've got a laptop, you can go to them, right? We are all in different places and we are going back out in the world, but this is something you can do so easily in Zoom. You share your screen, you help them get started. If you've got a comms department, if you've got even one person in finance or grants management who said they can clear like an hour or 2 a week, just do it and start to help our nonprofits. This is not always about writing a check or anything. It's really about your time and service, because you know what is required to get money from your org. And so you are best positioned to make sure that other nonprofits can meet those demands. And that's just sometimes just a few minutes of your time.
Great. And I would say from Candid's standpoint, this is the reason that we're launching demographics via Candid, is that our hope is that when nonprofits get asked by one funder or one association for their demographics using the Candid profile once, and then they get asked by somebody else, and they get asked by somebody else, it'll just become, the obvious time-saving way to do this is to do it one time where everybody can get it there. I know for us, it just makes our lives so much easier if everybody's pulling that information instead of asking us 100 times over each year. I'm going to direct the next question to Grant. So what do you envision would be the potential uses of this data that's collected across the network, but also within individual organizations?
Yeah, when this question came across, I was like, well, we could spend probably hours or days or months on this, right? It's a big one. I think there's a couple things, and I like how it's broken down into network and individual organizations. And Mike hit the nail on the head. There's a chicken and egg situation here, where it is putting the information in and then capturing the information and making sure, your grants management systems are asking the data. Like, the ball has to start somewhere, right? Start rolling. And I think that's what we have with the Candid profiles. So in terms of like the consistency of the data, one thing we've seen time and time again is when there's not a consistent way to capture the data, it can't be information. So things like open field text boxes, somebody could have typos, they're going to put, different field values in there. You cannot then go meet with your peers in your geographic area or what have you and talk about what impact your organizations are having or their funding's having, or maybe it's focus area across the entire United States. I think there's other things that are really interesting too, as we've talked to a lot of our funders who are interested in this and want to do more of this with their nonprofits is, some of them are funding or focused on BIPOC-led organizations, which is great. And a lot of that you can find out by going to the website and talking with them. Some of the things that they might want to focus on as funders, they said they actually didn't find out until they went and looked at their GuideStar or their Candid profile and saw the data that they were putting in some of these things. And so that to me just started lighting off light bulbs. Like if we can start pulling in this data for folks, our funders are going to start finding out more information. And you've all heard the analogy, if you've met one foundation, you've met one foundation. I think that's relatively true. I think Mike spoke to this as well. But there needs to be some standards put in place that I think a lot of people want to focus on. Like if you're looking for BIPOC-led organizations and you're in a geographic area, that limits the focus area that you and the other funders are going to be looking at. So I think by just having this data there in a single spot that multiple organizations can be pulling in and looking at, just helps people get informed and make better decisions, check impact, talk with each other. I mean, it's data as information is tremendously powerful.
Couldn't agree more. We love data. Anyone else have thoughts?
Yeah, well, just picking up on something Grant brought up, this opportunity to be able to leverage data that maybe is coming from a source that the organizations are managing can free up time for program staff to really truly engage and interact with their grantees instead of reaching out every year and looking for any updates to address and website. This information it's drawn into GuideStar through the IRS feed, but there's a huge amount of organizations that are actively managing that, and that's if you can count on that to be sort of the source place to go to, it's going to free up bandwidth for both not just the people on the ground but the program staff. The other thing is, Demographics via Candid really does provide a great example of the promise of, this tools that promote and enable greater transparency through low cost and no cost systems, and also help establish the necessary standards for sharing this data and then how we can then leverage it programmatically. There's a lot of exciting initiatives happening out there right now within the philanthropic sector around data sharing and collaboration. For example, the Philanthropy Data Commons project, as well as the work that the Technology Association of Grantmakers did on their Fix the Form initiative. And I'm extremely happy to see that Candid is an active partner in not just those two initiatives, but really across the board. So I applaud Ann Mei and the staff for really truly embracing the potential for this effort and what it can do for our sector.
Great. Well, for the next question, I'm going to turn to Satanya. This is something we get asked a lot. Is there any interest in working with funders to develop and use a common definition for BIPOC-led and BIPOC-serving organizations?
Yes. I was laughing when we first got this question. I said, the answer is yes. And so I think I can reflect on what you have shared, Ann Mei, as well as Mike, Don, and Grant, is that there is so much energy right now in thinking about ways that funders in particular can both collaborate and really reinforce great practices, right? I don't think anyone's trying to be out there alone. When I start to think about AppBee turning, I think 52 this year, there have been organizations like AppBee and PRE and Race Matters and Pro Inspired. There's institutes, GARE, everyone, they've been talking about this for a long time. So what I encourage folks to know is that there has been conversation around good definitions to start with and they are rooted in. Cheryl opened by talking about data being long in the tooth in both the sector and, of course, in thinking about social sector impact. I have, like with me, this is just like a little, like a visual, you can't totally read it, but it's W.E.B. Du Bois's book on visualizing Black America. And so what I would just say is that there have been folks that have been working on this. We always, when advancing equity, must find common ways to both define and work. And so I do think that there are organizations at the forefront of this. I think there are definitions. I send everybody back to Race Matters. If you're just looking, if you're not ready for collaboration just yet, but you just want some resources, there are sources out there who've really taken time to gather a lot of input, both from community, funders, the sector, and to look to government in the way census tracts and lots of information is being gathered, and to try to find this middle ground. And so I do believe that there's both interest. I do believe that these common definitions to help you get started are there, and I encourage you to reach out. Peak is not the expert in the space. We go to the experts to find out, because people do come into our world, found it. All of us, we get asked these questions, and you have to be ready. So I think going back, there are organizations like the Annie E. Casey Foundation, Hewlett, many others. Kellogg is leading everyone on funding racial equity and equity in general. So of course, we do have to be talking the same language to do this work well. And just be assured that there are folks out there ready to collaborate. And to echo something Mike said, as your program officers become so important in this work, because when they're not doing busy work, they can be focusing on these important things. You cannot collaborate with other funders until you know that they're on your same page. And I think both this DvC, as well as knowing that folks have already been at this work and you can just go grab it and borrow it. If you want to be a special snowflake, you're on your own. I think we're trying to move past being special snowflakes in this space and to work collaboratively. But folks are interested and they're ready to go and ready to lend you what they've learned over many, many years of work.
Now, anyone else have thoughts on this topic?
I just want to say I echo everything that you stated, all of you, because we are no longer the snowflake, right? We're building icebergs together and then melting it, right? And so the more we think about being intentional in our language, the more we think about we are not going to win at this until the least of us is addressed, the better we can go forward. So one of the ways that we use Candid data, I use it in board equity, in board governance training. Whenever the board is not diverse, they come to me. I have funders that say, Dawn, tell me about this agency. I can pull data like that. And then I can go back to that agency and that board and say, hey, what are we going to do about where we stand? And so, this is wonderful. I just want to say thank you, Echo. Kudos, waves, I'm done. I'm full.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dawn. Grant, Mike, anything to add about defining what BIPOC-led? How we define that?
I don't know if I could say it any better than what's already been said. I think the one thing we have found with folks is some people have been nervous to reach out and ask questions, and don't be. Like, there's people out there doing this. There's people who are experts out there. Reach out to them, talk to them. They actually learn from these questions. And they're like, I didn't think about that. You might bring a different light to the conversation. So I think the easy part is joining a webinar and listening. I think the hard part now is the next step. Like, how do we get this thing into our forums? How do we get these questions going in our areas? Mike's done this. It's getting the data, putting it in the systems. Boy, there's so many resources out there though. And Candid is a fantastic one along with Peak. So yeah, just don't hesitate to ask questions.
Thank you. Mike, last word?
Yeah, well, just, a point on, I think shared definitions are important, but I think what's critical in coming to shared definitions is having that granular source data. And this is what's, fantastic about, this initiative, is it's helping us get this pool of data together that we can work and we can think and we can have a conversation around, how do we communicate this? And, so the hard part, Candid's helping us out with it through creating not just the platform where it can be reported, but then the tools to connect with it, disseminate it, and then to move forward. So,
Thank you. And I should just mention, earlier I mentioned the Kellogg Foundation is leading an effort called the Equity Data Work Group that is really trying to work with a group of foundations to come up with a standard definition for or nonprofits that are BIPOC-led or people of color-led. So stay tuned for their work as well. I want to thank all of our panelists for such an amazing discussion. You guys are real leaders in this sector. Thank you for taking the time to join us here today for our launch. Again, thank you all for joining us here today and for making Demographics via Candid a reality.